Regional Director for CalSTAR, a national clean transportation organization, and I'm also the chair of the Northeast Diesel Collaborative Strategic Planning Committee. And I'm here joined with our team, and we're excited to talk about a very important subject that I know a lot of you are probably putting your attention to right now. So I'm hoping that with today's call, we'll be able to provide you with some really good information and guidance, and certainly partnerships. If I can just quickly ask that whoever is our panelists, if they can put themselves on mute, that would be great. Thank you so much. All righty. So today's agenda, we wanted to just real quickly show you how we're progressing along our work group roadmap. And then we have an exciting announcement. We have our date set for the Northeast Clean Freight Corridors workshop. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then most importantly, we're going to get to work. And we're going to be discussing what I know a lot of us are anticipating, the release of the Federal Register on the FAST Act Section 1413 on designating alternative fuel corridors and submitting applications that nominate specific corridors. Well, we have a really good lineup of different topics to discuss, and certainly want to engage your feedback on how the Northeast Clean Freight Corridors work group can assist you in submitting a successful application. And then at the end of the day, how can we work together to support the goals and objectives of the Northeast Corridor Work Group, and that is promoting regional coordination to promote clean corridors in the Northeast. And then lastly, what we'll do is we'll open up our call to a really engaging discussion. We want to hear from you, and we want to get your feedback. So real quickly, just a little housekeeping. I wanted you to know that on the right side, you should be able to see that there are 4 out of 5 handouts that have been uploaded to the webinar for your review and for convenience, and to just make sure that you have access to these documents. One is a copy of today's PowerPoint presentation so that you have that handy. And also, earlier this morning, I had sent out draft language supporting a clean corridor designation, and that would be on behalf of the Northeast Clean Freight Corridors Work Group and the Northeast Diesel Collaborative. So I have provided that as an attachment in both Word and in PDF. So for folks, when we are at that point where we're taking in feedback, I want to give folks the opportunity that they can actually submit their comments via email. And then the other item that we have enclosed is an updated roadmap to reflect the date of the workshop, so that you have the latest and greatest version of the roadmap. All right, with that, let's keep moving on here. So here is the roadmap, and you can see that we are now at number 5. We are right in the middle, making excellent progress, and I think today's topic is probably the most important topics, and it's just so great that we have the various diverse stakeholders that we have on the phone today. I'm very excited to say that we have about 63 folks that are registered for today's webinar, and each call, our numbers continue to grow, and that's just great. It shows that, you know, our group is providing value, and that we're providing an opportunity for folks to collaborate and share ideas and figure out how we can work together. So we want to continue along this roadmap, and I think at the end of today's call, we would really like to get more information from you on what our next call should focus on. So you can see here on the roadmap, we've indicated clean infrastructure and equipment, but we may learn through today's discussion, certainly when the RFA under the FAST Act Section 1413 through the Federal Register is released, we might want to have a dedicated call so that we're actually going through that application and getting a better understanding of what it entails. So our workshop, we're looking at November 2nd through the 4th, 2016. I'm just now noticing that little error. But nonetheless, we've got a wonderful host that is going to convene our meeting in Troy, New York at RPI. We find that they would be a perfect partner, and we're just really gracious to receive us. This is very close to Albany, New York, and so it's easy to commute by train or by plane, and certainly there'll be plenty of parking for folks who'll be driving in. And we're looking at potentially holding about 150 people. just to give you a little background on the structure of how the workshop will conclude, we're looking at a day-and-a-half program. We'll have everyone arrive on Wednesday afternoon, depending on sponsorship and then what we're able to do in terms of securing resources to cover food and beverages. We might have some type of afternoon reception to welcome everyone. But then the plan would be to have a full-day program on Thursday, which would be the Northeast Clean Freight Corridors workshop. And then on Friday, it would be a half-day program, and this would be the Federal Highways Pooled Fund workshop that would be specifically inviting state DOTs and MPOs to participate in that half-day program. We'll have a lot more information on this day-and-a-half workshop, but just wanted to let you know that this is now set, and now it's time to get ready and to start pulling together a really good program. So on that, on program development, we'll be working with a very key team planning group who will be working together on a regular basis to pull the program together. But we'll also be soliciting feedback from the work group. We want to make sure that we are identifying and focusing on topics that are of relevance to you, and really at the end of the day help us lead toward a path on how we can really improve and promote clean freight corridors in the Northeast. And I think with the designation of clean corridors through the FAST Act, I think there's just a lot of opportunity, and I think this will be well timed for all of us to get together in Troy in November. And then we're also going to be looking for sponsorship opportunities. Now, our food and beverages will need to cover by sponsorship, so that's where we'll ask for our friends who would be interested in possibly exhibiting, and we're going to be pulling together a sponsorship packet to offer a variety of ways that a company can be represented and to share their services and their technologies. But again, we'll have more information on that coming out soon. All right, so for today's objectives, we have 4 very important objectives, and I'm very excited. I have 2 lovely team members, Abby Swain from EPA Region 1 and Susan McSherry from New York City DOT. Both of these 2 gals have worked really hard with me on putting together this presentation and to walk through a number of steps that we hope will provide you with some good guidance, with some good ideas, knowing that the RFI has not been released yet. We certainly don't know exactly what will be required for a clean corridor designation application, but I think we've learned a lot from our past webinar to give us some good insight on what we need to do now in terms of planning, and then ultimately looking at, through this draft language that we prepared, looking at how we can support a regional approach to promoting clean freight corridors in the Northeast. So we're first going to start off with revisiting what have we learned in the first 4 webinars that are really going to help us today in our discussion on designating clean corridors. Secondly, we want to support workgroup members' individual applications for alternative fuel corridor designation. So giving some ideas on what could be helpful and what could make your application successful, and then ultimately how can we help you be successful. Third, we have the draft language, as I've mentioned, and of course that again is available for download off the webinar for your review, and we'll go over some slides to basically detail some of the contents of that letter if you haven't had a chance to review it. And then lastly, we want to identify candidate Northeast alternative fuel corridors for workgroup consideration. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to Abby Swain, and Abby is going to give us a quick recap on the webinars from 1 through 4. Abby, over to you.
Great, thanks, Alicia. Let's advance to the next slide. I'm going to make this as quick as possible while recapping some important points that I think we were told and that we discussed from our webinars that led up to this one. We've had some very important contributors on those webinars, so I don't want to let us forget what they've told us, and there are some new folks on the phone who probably haven't had a chance to go through the recordings and the slides that are posted on our website. So on this first call in February, we introduced this newly founded initiative of the Northeast Diesel Collaborative. NEDC itself is over 10 years old. It's a partnership of the state environmental agencies and EPA plus businesses and nonprofits that's all aimed at reducing transportation emissions and improving air quality. So at the NEDC's meeting last fall, federal, state, and local participants from transportation, energy, and environmental agencies voiced a need to collaborate across disciplines and geopolitical boundaries to tackle the Northeast's freight infrastructure and environmental challenges. And this sort of call to action built on groundwork that was actually laid by the DOT Volpe Center back in 2014 at their New England Freight Forum. And we had some folks who were involved in that event at our NEDC meeting. Our basic goal is to facilitate the adoption of cleaner and more efficient transportation technologies for use by freight carriers in the Northeast by promoting collaboration across a diverse stakeholder partnership to focus attention and resources on key freight corridors. So that's what the NEDC Clean Freight Corridor partnership is all about. A reason that we're up to this sooner rather than later and are trying to put our jets on is to get on board with the Fixing America's Surface Transportation FAST Act opportunities, in particular Section 1413, which is the alt fuel corridor designation process, and Section 1105, which is nationally significant freight and highway projects. So on this call we had a number of folks who had been at the NEDC fall 2015 meeting chime in and say, yeah, we heard what happened there, and yeah, we think that this next step, doing this Northeast Clean Freight Collaborative or Coalition project is very important. Next slide. So on this, let's see. I'm not seeing the next slide yet. Ah, there we go. So on the first webinar, we took a gander at these maps that were posted, and these are available on the Alternative Fuel Data Center DOE website that just kind of give a snapshot of what publicly available alt fuel facilities currently exist in the Northeast for the fuels that are depicted there. There are also 2 hydrogen fuel stations in Connecticut and Massachusetts that are not shown there. Next slide. I guess we're a little slow here. Sorry about the gap in airtime there.
There's a little, you see it? Okay.
A little lag.
It's a little going on.
All right. We'll cope. So our second webinar focused on funding clean freight corridors, which is awfully important. Money is always important. DOT described how their new and ongoing grant programs relate to their freight planning priorities, priorities like increasing truck parking supply, reducing emissions, making communities near freight facilities more livable, and corridor approaches. Among the criteria that we heard about for fast lane grants are benefit to communities and the environment, strong collaboration among a broad range of stakeholders, and innovation. So that hits on some things that the Northeast Clean Freight Corridor group is all about. Tiger also encourages partnerships, collaboration, and new ideas, but has more of a multimodal focus than Fastlane does. So those hit those resonated. Then EPA described how agencies and nonprofits, and through those eligible applicants, collaborating businesses, can get DERA support, clean diesel support, for relevant projects like equipping truck parking, ship berths, and rail yards with shore power to reduce idling, and for replacing or repowering vehicles to run on alt fuels. Freight facilities and fleets are high priority for DERA, both nationally and in the Northeast. And we heard a little bit about what Massport had done at the Conley terminal with DERA funds. Then MARAD displayed a map of several years of Tiger and marine highway investments in the Northeast region and described MARAD's interest in collaborating with us on marine corridor, port, and intermodal projects. Next slide. Webinar 3 oriented the group to what, how, and where freight moves and often gets stuck in the Northeast. So Federal Highway showed national maps that compared port, truck, and rail flows versus capacity now and in 2040, and maps of truck travel to, from, and within, but not through, each Northeast state. They also explained how the 4th edition of Federal Highways Freight Analysis Framework, or FAF, data can be used to aid planning, especially once the new maps are available in the fall. The Northeast has pretty good rail capacity, they mentioned, but freight trip segment links may not lend themselves to using it as well as otherwise might be done. Then the I-95 Corridor Coalition talked about the incomplete state of freight planning at the state level and data collection efforts, and the need to knit state freight plans into a regional corridor perspective and develop coordinated action and investment plans according to those perspectives. For example, bottlenecks and choke points need to be addressed from the corridor and network perspective so they're not merely moved farther down the line. We learned something about the coalition's past work to identify and address highway and rail choke points and to develop alternative marine routes. They also listed goals in common between our coalition and their coalition and our group, including emissions reduction and sound public investment, and indicated a desire to collaborate going forward. Cambridge Systematics described their white paper, which was commissioned by the coalition, on measuring the performance of supply chains across multi-state jurisdictions, that's a mouthful, in order to target public investments in ways that will improve freight system performance and support economic growth. So taking the perspective of the shippers and carriers of several types of cargo, it turns out that travel time and reliability have a big impact on cost and decisions about how to route product. And freight planners can use publicly available supply chain data to better understand how industry is using available infrastructure. So those are some good perspectives. Next slide. On the 4th and most recent webinar, we drilled a bit deeper into how we want to define clean corridors in the Northeast. The New York Metropolitan Transportation Council said that as MPOs make required periodic updates to their regional transportation plans, they should incorporate new info on freight flows and technology and respond to increased federal and state emphasis on clean air goals. Jerry will share with us later the Council's interest in taking a clean freight corridor perspective and providing alt-fuel infrastructure based on freight volumes, origins, and destinations, and supplies. California is motivated by an executive order to transform the state freight system by improving efficiency, transitioning to zero tailpipe emission technologies, and increasing competitiveness. Almost 2/3 of California freight moves entirely within California, so that's a bit of an advantage, but they acknowledge the need to coordinate across with jurisdictions farther north and south along the I-5 corridor. California's new sustainable freight plan relies in part on increased use of low-carbon renewable fuels like hydrogen and electric charging stations. So that was a good example from the left coast. Federal Highway reviewed takeaways from 2 May webinars that solicited stakeholder feedback on the designation of alternative fuel corridor process. So they said that the designation process will focus on both passenger and commercial vehicles, identify near and long-term needs for electric, hydrogen fuel cell, propane, and natural gas fueling infrastructure, taking into account existing infrastructure, both the demand and location, entail extremely fast turnaround, i.e. designations are due out by December 2016, with redesignation opportunity 5 years out. And they'll request nominations from state and local officials of all sorts. Federal Highway explained that no new funding is authorized by Section 1413, but designated corridors are likely to attract DOT and other funding. Some feedback they said they heard on their May webinars introducing this designation process that's of interest to us and what we're up to includes corridors don't have to be perfectly linear. They can be network shaped and they can serve multiple modes. Corridors should see high volumes, serve major trip segments, have logical endpoints like major metro areas, and if linear, should cross state boundaries. Proximity to disadvantaged communities matters, and improving air quality is a major goal. Proposers should make the case for fuel types based on demand, which may differ for freight and passenger vehicles, and take into account existing infrastructure. One goal of the program is to achieve better standardization of alt fuel offerings, but Federal Highway doesn't want to play favorites at this stage. Federal Highway is working closely with DOE's Alt Fuel Data Center and encourages our coordination with Clean Cities coalitions. Federal Highway also heard on these webinars that there's a need to coordinate alt fuel corridor designation with work by the DOT-led National Coalition on Truck Parking to increase truck parking supply and include no idle electric standby options in that supply. Finally, on this webinar, participants were encouraged to think about how we want to define clean corridors for ourselves in the Northeast. So, for instance, how do we define corridor in terms of minimum freight volume, linear versus other shapes, highway versus rail and marine modes, inclusion of feeder routes, and important facilities like intermodal yards. Then, how do we define clean in terms of preferred fuels, idle reduction technology, and perhaps encouraging a shift to more efficient modes? Finally, how do we choose top priority corridors? Do we focus on low-performing routes where layovers therefore occur and refueling demand exists? Do we focus on those where some alt fuel service is already provided, but more is needed by fuels ready to convert their vehicles? Do we focus on heavily populated areas where people live close to infrastructure and those with air quality non-attainment issues? Or do we try to get freight off highways and onto rail or marine corridors? We didn't make any decisions, needless to say, on this webinar, and we will really have to develop that kind of direction and common understanding over continued conversations, including in person this November in Troy. The next slide is just one slide that New York MTC showed to illustrate how they've analyzed their major freight volumes and routes, which is an important step in targeting for clean and alt fuel freight corridors. That's all I have, Alicia.
Abby, gosh, you're a master of overview. That was excellent. Thank you so much. I think you walked us through a very good summary of the key outcomes of our first 4 webinars and how that really leads us up to today's important discussion on designating alternative fuel corridors and getting ourselves prepared for the release of the FAST Act Section 1413 RFI or RFA. I'm not sure yet through the Federal Register, but we're hoping to arm you with some important thoughts, some important considerations to get your applications ready before you actually get to see the application itself. I think what we want to do is at least help give you the information or to help start thinking about what might be needed, and then ultimately how partners on this phone call today can support your individual applications, and then ultimately how that can lead to supporting a regional clean corridor aspect. So now we're going to have Susan McSherry walk us through the mechanics of preparing for a designation application. Susan, I just want to make sure you're there. Can you hear me? Oh, there you are. Wonderful. Okay, great. So Susan, go ahead and take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Alicia, and thanks, Abby. That was really great. So, yeah, we've come to the point in the webinar where it's just one big, sort of question mark. It's really difficult to speculate how to approach this without a Federal Register notice out. We had thought that would be have happened by now in terms of our timeline, but so without it, we've just sort of looked at some other prior examples and possible examples that we could take a look at that could potentially serve as a template for what an application may look like going forward, such as the Married Marine Highways Initiative and National Highway Freight Network work that's going on across the country right now. Just to kind of highlight some of the basic information about corridor descriptions, the number of miles on the freight highway network, what direction, beginning and end points, the centerline miles, what would be the metro areas and rural areas and population density, and just getting a really good handle on some of those aspects for the potential application. And then other attributes such as, the significance of the corridor for moving freight commodities. There is a tremendous amount of information on the Federal Highway Administration website that talks about annual freight tonnage. They also have a good website that is broken down by state in terms of what the network looks like and what segments comprise the network in each of those states, and what are the close proximities to ports and terminals, container terminals, and things of that nature where the business of freight takes place. And what are the connector and feeder routes. Layover facilities would be a good, sort of piece of information to include in the application. And then some of the emissions and air quality issues that are, so prevalent in the Northeast region. Obviously, everything is geared towards making this, a clean and efficient multimodal transportation policy. This is Clean Corridors is a part of that, and I think it's just works to have all of that information at the ready for the application. Proximity to environmental, EJ areas and low-income communities, as was earlier discussed, is also going to be of significant importance. And then from the prior webinars, we had heard from Federal Highway that the corridors are going to take into account investments that have already been made. So again, back to the AFDC locator, some good homework would need to be done with the Clean Cities coordinators as to whether or not those facilities are still active, and get a good sense of where the gaps exist. Talk to people who are in touch with the freight community to find out, what their needs might be, and try to work with them in terms of, unmet demand for alternative fuels and no idle layover. And also just look at it from a geographic perspective on the spacing of those facilities to identify additional fueling requirements and layover areas. A lot of it is based on there's going to be a lot of issues dealing with land management that will need to be sort of taken a look at sooner rather than later to see exactly what will be available. So there'll be significant amount of legwork for this. And then the justification of economic benefits and jobs, green jobs, safety and security, environmental and sustainability benefits, getting back to air quality and greenhouse gas reduction strategies, how a clean corridor could help mitigate issues dealing with SIPs or TIPs, and how that might factor in, and then aligning all of that with what your state freight plan goals are. The next slide, please. So I just quickly put out a couple of definitions of what comprises the National Highway Freight Network and how USDOT defines portions of that network. The website, the link below, will take you directly to the website that shows all of the information of the highway segments and points of interest in terms of ports and rail facilities. That's the link that you can go to right there. It'll take you directly to your state, which is very helpful because that USDOT information is national and not broken down, so that's very helpful. And then so that's it with the mechanics. Again, this is just trying to get a basic handle on the outline of what information would need to be gathered in terms of responding to the RFI once it comes out. And what Alicia had alluded to earlier with the attachment for the draft language of a support document. We just wanted to lay out for you, what we were thinking in terms of that approach. One would be the NEDC could definitely supply a letter of support, a typical cover letter to some entity's individual application for their specific area. We also have what's attached, which is the drop-in language that could be very useful to help round out the macro issues surrounding the regional community at large, and why your card or designation application is so important to that. So we've attached the overview, an overview, so that you can take a look at that draft language. It's a statement on behalf of the Northeast Clean Fuel Corridor in support of an application. It talks about, the importance of the Northeast states in terms of population and economy, economic factors, GDP, the current and future freight and air quality issues, and forecasts for additional population, additional freight needs, consequences to that in terms of air quality and the need to address air quality issues, and the opportunity that's at hand in terms of taking a look at this as a corridor approach regarding alternative fuels and looking at it at a regional level. Next slide, please. So we wanted to point out that the Clean Fuel Corridor, the NECFC, provides a regional platform for coordination. It's a great venue to be able to reach out to all of the various players and essential partners across all of these disciplines to try to come to sort of terms with how we approach this designation opportunity and to promote cleaner and more efficient freight corridors in our region. And we also identified the obvious, big fish, the bigger corridors in the region, I-95, 84, 90, 87, and 78. We had a suggestion by Boston MPO to identify a Northeast triangle, which would include 87, 90, and 95. That would really do a great job of coverage in terms of the Northeast region. And we also talked about how this will help meet our long-term goals and what benefits it would bring to the supply chain resiliency and to the environment. Again, to be used as a mitigation strategy in the SIPs and TIPs, and to leverage investment of alternative fuel stations that are already in place. So engaging partner support, again, I think just everybody needs to think about coming together, and the NEDC is a great forum for that. To work with our Clean Cities coalitions, who really are the boots on the ground that have helped with the infrastructure development and continue to monitor the comings and goings of that infrastructure. That would be of real importance to the overall application that you might be working on, and to work with the MPOs, DOTs together to monitor designation and the application project. If there's, it depends again on who's going to submit the application. It could come directly from the MPO or DOT. It doesn't necessarily have to. So agencies, will need to make those decisions as they see fit when the RFI does come out, and if an application is going to be forthcoming. And then always outreach, stakeholder and fleet outreach, to alert and educate fleets about the potential opportunity and the impact that this would have. There are big fleets out there. There are EPA SmartWay partners out there who are anxious to see this happen on not only a regional level but a national level, so that they can transition their fleets over to various alternative fuels, whatever works for them in their particular application, and would really welcome seeing a comprehensive strategy to address this. So there would be certainly letters of support out there that could be gotten for the application that would be very helpful in showing solidarity and some consistency with the messaging that we're trying to get out. And so that's all I have, all to say that it really is just being able to tee everything up, get the information that you need, look at the MARAD Marine Highway website for some ideas, how that is formatted, the information and Federal Highway Administration website. We'll work on developing the relationships with the states and MPOs regionally to see this through, and look forward to seeing the Federal Register notice so that we really have some clarity as to how to proceed.
Great, Susan. Wonderful walkthrough of the mechanics on what are some important considerations, and then certainly looking at this draft language and how that can support work group members, looking at their specific and unique applications, and then ultimately how that speaks to a regional approach on promoting alternative fuel corridors within the Northeast and having a more coordinated strategy. I guess this is the opportunity, and I'm excited because, we're going to have a little more time to have a really good back and forth discussion with everyone on the phone. And so I guess the first thing I would like to ask, and I asked Susan and Abby and our other team leads that are on the call today to help spur questions to get folks to interact. But I would love to hear your thoughts on the draft language. And again, I know many of you may have not had an opportunity to review it carefully. Susan did just do a nice job of kind of giving you a high-level view of what the components of the draft language is. What do you think, and in terms of your applications, and certainly I know a number of you may be kind of getting yourselves ready to anticipate the release of the RFI and would be interested in submitting an application, and some of you are still trying to figure the process that needs to be taken in order to kind of coordinate and then submit an application. And that's where, to the extent that we can help you, we want to be there for you. So let me just open it up to the group. What do you think about this idea of whether you would use the drop-in language to support an application you would be submitting, or do you think a letter of support on behalf of the Northeast Clean Freight Corridor work group via the Northeast Diesel Collaborative would be supportive or more effective? Or maybe it might be a combination of both. What do you think? And what I'm going to do, and I see Allison. I'm going to go ahead, Allison. I see your hand raised. I'm going to ask you. Allison, can you hear me?
I don't have a...
Hi, Allison. I've unmuted you, so you can go ahead and speak.
Sorry. I don't know.
Okay. So maybe we'll try somebody else until I don't know if she can hear me. Maybe I can call on some of our folks that we've asked to kind of share their perspectives and their feedback. I see our friend Jerry Bogaz has joined us. Jerry, what do you think? And I don't know if you've had a chance to review it carefully, but is this something that you would see helpful to you as an MPO working with your members on a potential application? What would be the best methodology in your perspective? Jerry, can you hear me? You might be on mute. I promise you I haven't muted you. All right. Oh, Peg Hannah, hold on. Let me unmute you. Oh, you know what, Peg? If you can enter in your audio pin, then I can unmute you. Let me start off with Paul Monahan. In 1 second, Paul. Paul, go ahead. Paul, can you hear me? All righty. I'm having a little bit of a technical difficulty here. I'm not hearing folks that I'm trying to unmute. Go ahead.
I can jump in if you since I'm already on apparently.
Oh, Ian, go ahead. Yes, absolutely.
Sounds like you're having some technical difficulties over there.
I am. Thank you. Take it away.
Sure. I think they're both. I mean, I think that the draft letter looks fantastic. I mean, it's a great framework for moving forward with a proposal. And I think a letter of support behind that would also be helpful. So, to answer your question, I'd say, in my opinion anyway, both. We would need to show support of the Northeast Diesel Collaborative, and coming from Massport's point of view, we would want local community and regional community representative type organizations behind it as well. The bulk of what we do here directly impacts I-93. I mean, everything that comes out of either the airport or Conley Terminal is going to hit I-93. And from there, it may go up to 95, it may stay on 93, it may go into the secondary roadways and things like that. But, we didn't mention that by name, but, the idea of having a triangle or a region, I do like that.
Great. No, thanks, Ian. That's very helpful. That's very helpful. All right, great. Well, let me see if I can unmute some other folks. I don't want the same problem I had before. Oh, my dear friend Edith. Hold on 1 second, Edith. Let me unmute you. Where'd you go? And the great thing is I have a lot of wonderful people signed up. One thing is scrolling down. So, go ahead, Edith. Edith, can you hear me? Hi, Edith. Go ahead and speak up. You may have muted yourself. I don't know, Abby, if you want to go ahead and try to help me unmute folks in case my system's just not working. Jerry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can. Woo, gotcha. Go ahead.
So, I was talking before also. I was saying some tremendous things. Anyway, if I can remember what I was saying. Anything would be helpful, letters of support, and even drop-in language for the application, but until we really understand what the application is going to entail, it's really hard to, specifically, it's very hard to know exactly what the best assistance will be. So hopefully that RFI will be out soon, and we'll be able to really hone in on how exactly this information can help. And of course, you know that we're also working with our members to take an action on this to help with the nomination of corridors, in addition to whatever we have to do through the application process. So, kind of where we are right now, Alicia.
Alicia, it looks like Peg is ready to be called on.
Okay, wonderful. Let me see. All right, Peg, let me look for you. There you are. All right, Peg, take it away.
Can you hear me?
I can. Yay.
Okay, good. All right. Hi, Alicia. So my question is just a simple strategic one. If it's the states really that are eligible to apply as opposed to a regional organization like NECFC. How do we demonstrate a regional approach if we just have, like, say, let's just say New Jersey and New Hampshire are the only two states in the Northeast that are going to apply? How do we demonstrate that this is a regional freight corridor with just two individual states applying? Are there any thoughts on how we would do that, or are we really feeling like we need a whole group of states, contiguous states, to apply?
That's a good question, and we discussed that as a strategic team, an NEDC strategic team, on how can we best support a regional application, and not knowing exactly who amongst our work group will be submitting applications or who plan to submit applications, what would be the best process to, one, whether we support their application that would say that they're participating in a regional effort to better coordinate and plan clean corridors or alternative fuel corridors, or would we want to pull together an application on behalf of our work group and then submit through a state or local agency. We've talked about that. We felt that maybe it would be more difficult for us to get sign-off, if we were to have a number of states participate and help us identify and nominate and, explain the criteria and why we're selecting those specific corridors, what process that might take just to get everyone in agreement. So we felt maybe the best way to start off in terms of our discussion with everyone today was, well, let's draft some language that might be helpful to an application or could be something that could be in a support letter. And the other idea, Peg, is, the support letter, if someone were to submit an application and they were requesting a letter of support on behalf of the Northeast Diesel Collaborative via the Northeast Clean Freight Corridors Work Group, would possibly looking at how we could get some signatories that would represent the Northeast states, whether it's Clean Cities, whether it's our state DOTs, whether it's our MPOs, to help kind of provide that additional kick of support with that application. But back to your question on, how are we, or how can we effectively ensure or help promote regional coordination via a possible regional application? We would love to hear, what everyone thinks about that and whether they would support a regional application. Of course, our team here realizes that might take, some good work to coordinate that effort, but at the end of the day, I think we want to take advantage of this really good opportunity. We understand that corridor designation won't happen for another 5 years, so, it's kind of like the time is now. I'm hearing 30 days to apply, of which I believe if we can, ask for an extension to have a little more time to work on those applications, we just feel there's an urgency to have the discussion on this topic and figuring out how we can support individual applications or how we might support a regional application. I don't know, Susan or Abby, if you want to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I'll just chime in. You covered it well, but I think we have a couple of problems. One is a chicken-egg sort of coordination problem. We need a fair amount of time and collaboration and banding ideas back and forth in order to come up with, okay, what is our corridor of first priority, and then who are the players, and then who should step forward as lead versus supporting agencies. And the other problem we have is the timeline. It's just an extremely rushed timeline. So this is our sort of fallback approach, where we provide this language that expresses how we're working together sort of on an ongoing basis and throws out some ideas for how we might want to initially focus. But then I think, if organizations, agencies state to us that they intend to use this language and submit something, we can help facilitate contacts with other potentially affected agencies who might want to sign on as supporters. And then on the other end, once they receive the applications, it's my understanding that Federal Highway will do a little bit of massaging of what they get and do some technical assistance to try to make connections, I hope with our help, to kind of get corridors strung out as completely as possible based on the applications they've received.
Yeah, this is Susan. I think that's a good assessment of that, Abby, and also, you know, we'll be, you know, trying to work with the, you know, I know Port Authority's on the call is working on their freight plan. New York State's working on their freight plan. I think it's just, you know, elevating the issue, getting it on that agenda as an item also to say, you know, anything that you're doing right now with regard to that, this is you know, just another nuance that you need to be thinking about. There's all sorts of, you know, heavy lifting going on as far as that goes at all the various state levels, and it would, you know, it's going to require, I think, even if you get the designation, it'll require a couple of years to figure out where, you know, the facilities will exist, you know, like on the right-of-way, off the right-of-way. There's a lot of issues that I think state DOTs themselves are grappling with right now as far as that goes. But it's just all to say that this is a really good time to align the corridor designation efforts with the state freight plan efforts to make them complementary. And yeah, I think it'll bode well for both going forward in terms of you know, funding priorities and things of that nature too. So.
Great, Susan. Just real quick, so you all may have noticed I launched a poll basically asking your feedback on what you felt was more helpful, whether it would be draft language that would support an application or a support letter or both. And according to the poll so far, we're looking at 76% felt that both the drop-in language and the letter of support would be helpful. So that's great. Now 77%. So thanks, folks, for responding to that. Hopefully there's a way I can kind of present these results to you later following the webinar, but this is a new tool for me to figure out, but felt it would be good to have a little interaction with the group. All right, I see Steve Russell. Go ahead, I've unmuted you, and I also see Mike Hornsby, so I've unmuted both of you. Steve, do you want to go ahead and take it away?
Sure. Can you hear me?
I can.
Great. Yeah, I just wanted, on behalf of the Clean Cities Coalitions in the Northeast, just wanted, we've been having our discussion, we talk monthly, and this subject has come up, and we're all very supportive of jumping on this and making this move forward, because, you know, with our stakeholders and the fleets we know a lot about where all the alternative fuel locations are, and we would be quick to identify and help us move the corridor forward once we've identified which one it should be. We also hear from our stakeholders and kind of know where, you know, the needs of some fleets are that want to do alternative fuels but don't have the ability in their corridor to get the fuel. So we want to help you make this work. So you have the support of all the Clean Cities Coalitions in the Northeast.
Oh, you're awesome. That's great. Thank you so much, Steve. Really appreciate that. I know I invited a couple of others to, you know, I wanted to kind of get their feedback, but you guys have been just wonderful partners, and you are the boots on the ground and are the best to inform us of existing infrastructure and where there's some really good opportunities. And you have the relationships with the end users, which is absolutely key. So thank you very much for that support and really good feedback. So Mike, I've unmuted you. Did you want to share something? All right, I don't know where Mike went. Let me see, I'm going to unmute you right now. Go ahead, Lucy Buckingham.
Hi,
Hi.
this is Buckingham from Clean Energy. And I just wanted to know how, if you guys had any thoughts or ideas on how you want private alternative fuel station providers to participate and how we can assist. And, we're very supportive of the entire initiative. And, we have existing infrastructure and stations that have been built and some that have been built and are ready to be opened. We just need some fleets. So I'm kind of opening to that that conversation, I guess.
Oh no, Lacey, that's great. And I think you will, along with various other advanced tech providers and alternative fuel providers, will be key to certainly the assessment of corridor designation, but will be important partners for the planning of future infrastructure. So I think, to the extent that certainly with you participating in our work group and as we look at utilizing drop-in language and a letter of support, and of course once the RFI comes out through the Federal Register, we'll have a lot more information on what will really help make an application strong. I've been given some indication that we're kind of in that, that we're in the right direction in terms of what we're trying to do to help on a regional level. But I think absolutely, I think Lacey, you'll be a very important partner to our kind of communal voice in supporting individual applications and then anything that we would ultimately support on a regional level.
Great. So yeah, anything we can do, just please let us know, and if there's any ideas, we're here to help.
Great. You bet. Thanks, Lacey.
Concretely, this is Abby, just responding to Lacey also, come to the November get together. It won't be too late to help put the the dots on the I's once the designation applications have been submitted, and they'll be massaged definitely as far as locations and particular fuel choices. And also, if you're not already, be involved in the Clean Cities Coalitions.
Yes,
I imagine you are.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Because if we know who they are, it's easy to network with them regarding the fleets and the fuel providers and their view of the network. And so, if you're plugged into that, then you're automatically plugged into this.
Okay, and then can you guys make sure I'm on all your distribution lists as well?
Oh yeah, I'm in charge of that.
Okay,
I'll make sure.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Lacey. I was going to ask our friend Bill Kuttner from the Boston MPO. Bill, did you want to share any feedback or any thoughts?
Yes. Okay, you can hear me? I actually see my name on a computer screen. I've never seen that before. Anyway, can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I there?
You are there.
Okay. Okay. Here are my thoughts. And I'd already talked extensively with Abby, and she's incorporated some of my thoughts here. I'm sort of the person who conceived of this New England triangle, and I've heard some people speak positively of that. So I'm going to pose sort of a question. I have a new question which has come up since this talk. Is if we're envisioning some sort of geographically extensive corridor, it is going to involve a number of jurisdictions, be they MPOs or states or whatever. So let's have an example. Let's say we have a coin toss. It's Susan or myself or something. Steps up as scribe needs. So we get the information on Federal Register. Say fill this in, and somebody, the loser of the coin toss, sits down and starts putting the stuff in, and they get questions, and they transmit the questions to everybody in the area, and people get back and they pound everything in to make a nice application on behalf of a large region and many participant stakeholders, and they send it in. So let's say I were to do that and write up the stuff about the New England Triangle, send it in, and the feds say, great, you got the designation. And then I'm sitting here in my office, and then at some point in the future, the feds want decide they want to do something, like they think they're going to fund a study by Louis Berger and Associates looking at a fueling station somewhere in Danbury. And then so they might phone me here in Boston and say, you guys have this clean, this clean freight corridor. We want to fund a study of an alternative fueling station down in Danbury. Would you, Bill Kuttner up in Boston, would you set up a stakeholder panel to work with us? I mean, so my point is, once we win this thing, because based on our conversations today, it sounds like that we will put together a very fine application. Is there great, how do we, and let's say we win, and what is the ongoing involvement in this? Do we have, does the agency that is the lead applicant then become the point of contact for the feds for the next 5 years? And this is not the, just Scott Peterson, three doors down the hall from me, that's exactly the thing. When I first mentioned this, that's the first thing he asked. It says, who's doing this? How does this involve our agency? What's the commitment? That's exactly the same thing you asked me, and that's what I'm sort of asking here. Is I'm sort of in we have an opportunity. We haven't been told very much, but I'm sort of envisioning this long-term involvement, and that, in a sense, that's a concern, that's a question, that's an observation. I don't expect necessarily an answer now, but I would encourage us to sort of think in terms of, we got 5 years, we're going to have a great application, probably going to win. What does that mean? Because that's what I have to tell my people down the hall. Did that make any sense?
It did make sense, Bill, but it's a good question. I don't know if we have an answer to yet.
I'm trying to look quickly through the Q&A that Federal Highway posted, but what I think I heard is that there's a lead agency and then supporting agencies. So ideally, when you're collecting the raw material from your fellow MPOs, to the same extent that you are able to convince your MPO management to step forward in the lead, they can convince theirs to step forward as supporting agencies. And then once you win designation, then you would all be on the hook in your respective jurisdictions for follow-through.
So
does that sound plausible?
If we win, no, it's fine. So that means if we win, and they want to study a fueling station in Danbury, they'll phone up somebody down. They'll phone the people down in Connecticut.
I would imagine, because otherwise it would just be way too burdensome on one MPO.
Yeah, I mean, unless there was some, unless if this were a major effort, a position somewhere, someplace. Hartford would be a perfect place. Would be one person to be funded who would sort of deal with these things, be the ball carrier for the whole group. Obviously, we're thinking way ahead. But like I say, I ask this because these are the kinds of questions I'd get from Scott Peterson. What does this mean? Yeah.
Yep, that makes sense. Also, we're not planning to disappear this Northeast Clean Freight Corridor work group, so we would be glad to help facilitate sharing of burdens and communication and all that.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, well, that's my comment. You've already, Abby, you've already rendered most of my comments quite well in text, but that's sort of my fresh comment.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Bill. Just real quickly, I got a couple questions, or one more of a nice suggestion, and then I have a question. So from Jocelyn Jones, a suggestion: to consider presenting to the private sector groups along the corridor to get their input and possible letter of support. An association that comes to mind: trucking associations, Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, local roundtables, especially Boston, New York, and New Jersey. Jocelyn, that's a really good suggestion. And we have invited shippers and various fleet managers to participate in our work group. And maybe what we should do is, certainly reach out to them and make sure that we're getting their engagement in this process. I completely agree with you. And then Alan Powell has a statement here, or it might be a question. Let me read what you have here, Alan. There was a DOE, Department of Energy, Clean Corridors grant program several years ago that provided funding for alternative fuel corridors. The partners in each Southeast Diesel Collaborative were successful at receiving a grant for implementing alternative fuel projects along I-75 from Florida to Maine. You may want to look at how they went about submitting that application and what kinds of support they had. This is a program is a bit different, but I think the variety of partners in the application was critical to them being selected. Alan, very good point, and I know that Susan, I believe Jonathan Overly gave a really good presentation and spoke to the partnerships on that particular program. Am I stating the correct corridor?
Yeah. What was the corridor again? Wait.
I-75?
Yes. Mm-hmm. There's two actually. Yeah, that's one of them.
Okay, you said Michigan, not Maine. All right, that sounds right, Alan. I'm like, Maine? I thought it was more more Midwest.
Yeah, that's more from the southeast up through Midwest.
Right. Right. No, that is a really good example to look to. And in fact, everyone, we had a really good webinar that Susan and I hosted on behalf of the Northeast Diesel Collaborative, in which Jonathan Overly gave a really good presentation talking about that application and all of the dynamic partners that supported the successful implementation of that project. So let me see if I can find that webinar. I believe we also recorded that, and if folks are interested, we can make sure that that's accessible to you. All right, any other questions from folks on the call, or any additional thoughts? If I can ask, would folks be interested in providing feedback? I guess what I would like to say is we got this off to you today. Perhaps if we can give folks maybe a 2-week turnaround to maybe if they're interested in providing some comments, or if there's some additional, for example, if there are other corridors that are of interest, and we could even speak to them now. We did set up today's webinar to go to 3:30, so we do have some additional time. Are folks in agreement in terms of the corridors that we identified in the letter or the draft language? Let me pull back what we have identified on our PowerPoint presentation here. So we identified certainly the I-95 corridor, the I-84, I-90, I-87, I-78, and the I-80 corridors. And then also Bill had mentioned the Northeast Triangle, which I think is a great idea. Any additional thoughts to other corridors or critical corridors that should be considered within our Northeast region that should be mentioned?
This is Susan. In my research, came across some information that had been supplied by the state of Connecticut for the prior legislation for MAP 21, where they made a comment regarding some miles and corridors that supported Bradley Airport, for instance. So I would guess that maybe that's a critical rural corridor, something along those lines. So what we're talking about is some of the bigger, obviously the real big
right.
Highways, but there are, certainly critical connections to be made at the airports, and with forecasted increase in freight, to be significant increase in freight. I think I saw like 200% was some quote that I saw, that upstate and smaller, airports and airports that deal with freight, like Bradley or Stewart or something along those lines, that those connector roadways, might need to be acknowledged also. I don't know what those numbers are, or any information about them specifically, but that I just wanted to acknowledge that that's also, needs to be potentially looked at.
Right, that was a really good point. Jerry, go ahead.
Yeah, Alicia, this is Jerry. So I'd like to throw in the I-287 corridor as a possibility, but I also want to caution everyone that this is, just selecting corridors is probably not the best way to do this, and we need to base it at least somewhat on some numbers and so forth. And again, when we finally see what the RFI is and get a sense of how we're going to have to justify these things, we'll have more information. But it shouldn't be a laundry list of corridors. Certainly, there's a strategic aspect of this.
Right. Oh, you're right on. Absolutely, Jerry.
And we heard Ian talk about I-93. I don't think Ian's still on the phone. He probably had to jump off or something.
I'm still here.
But, oh, you are? Okay. Can you explain more? Is it just the volumes? Can you talk about destinations and potential for alt fuel use or idle free layover?
Well, I mean, Bill Kuttner could probably tell you a lot more about that. He's actually run the numbers as far as where the freight volumes are, especially coming out of Boston. But I mean, everything that comes out of Logan Airport and Conley Terminal, or into, for that matter, at some point hits I-93. So the interchanges between 93 and 95, or 93 itself, and some stay on 93 up through New Hampshire and Vermont. There are a number of highly urbanized areas and highly congested areas where I-95 in New York and New Jersey is, goes right through the middle of the city. Here it's kind of more on the outskirts. So it's a little bit different situation. I mean, it's a long road, right? So you've got different areas of it. It's just a thought. I'm kind of just throwing it out there for consideration, but you're right. We do have to do some homework and get some better numbers on it.
Oh, hi. This is Bill. Can I jump in and make a comment?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. When I defined triangle, I actually included New Hampshire, but I excluded Maine, and because New Hampshire, most of the activities down at the southern end where your containers go. You're right. I had a survey, and then Maine is just geographically just so different than the areas. That's way the heck up there. So my triangle does include southern New Hampshire, and in a sort of the corner, it's Portsmouth. So I don't list 93 because 93 is sort of like within that area. It goes down from Canton, goes up into New Hampshire, but it's by Manchester. It's hit most of its major destinations for the freight business. So it does, even though I don't list 93, most of 93's activity is embraced in that in the New England Triangle. So it's just basically, I was just looking at map. I looked at geography. What sort of, New Jersey's very different. Maine's very different, but this triangle seemed to embrace a lot of, sort of common, very similar network characteristics. It was sort of seemed to be had sort of a boundary, something we could sink our teeth into and, maybe do something.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. We could definitely speak to that, even if it's not listed individually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it might be nice if people try to imagine that triangle, which has a couple of sides that are actually parallel lines or sort of parallel lines, and say, okay, how does this sort of coincide with your own individual priorities, and could you get behind something like that? It's not a linear corridor, it's a three-sided linear corridor, but I think that's within what Federal Highway is contemplating for designation.
Okay.
Great. Other thoughts or questions from the group? Abby, any thoughts from you, my dear, in terms of questions we want to ask our team members? I do have one question regarding our next work group call, and I actually even set up a poll for it, which I'm excited to launch. But I wanted to ask folks, and of course we don't know when the Federal Register will come out, and certainly our next work group call will be on July 28th. So that is clearly a month from now. So the RFI could come out in 2 weeks, and then it'd be on the road for 2 weeks already, and then we're going to be talking about it. But I wanted to kind of get a sense from the group if, once it comes out, would we want to spend our next work group call reviewing it carefully and thinking about ways in which we can help partners that will be submitting an application. And if there is interest in, possible regional effort, what might that look like? But I wanted to at least open that up to the group to get thoughts from the team on whether or not that's something that we should consider. Any initial thoughts on that?
Are you asking me or everybody?
Everybody.
Okay.
I think discussing it would be a good idea. It would help us to, kind of narrow down our list. It's going to tell us off the bat what they're looking for and what would probably be excluded right off the bat.
Yeah. And actually, this is Bill Kuttner here. I think it would be very helpful, and I think part of that showed up in this meeting today, as if some very, very, very nice scribe sort of takes a peek at it and pulls together a couple talking points, gets it out to us a day or a half day, but before the talk, and then we can look at it and these talking points will probably deal with a lot of the stuff we've been talking about here and say, Federal Register, this is what we've learned, and anyway, that would be my my request, is somebody do an initial peek.
Okay. Very good. Well, so far, responses to the poll are indicating interest as such, so that's very good. Great.
I also just posted to chat my contact email, so I'm inviting people prior to the July call to send comments on the language that you can download from the handouts box, and just say what you think, or make suggestions about corridors to focus on, and we'll try to represent the feedback we get on the next call.
That's good.
Okay, great, Abby. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate your help. No, I think this has been a really good discussion. Certainly it's an exciting opportunity. There's a bit of a big unknown at this moment until we see the Federal Register. Certainly, I think we can anticipate there's going to be some good work behind pulling an application together. But we certainly, value the opportunity to work together in our partnership to support one another, and then certainly support our regional goals. So, definitely let us know if you have any feedback on the draft language that we have developed. We want to make sure that, once we do get the Federal Register, that we can fine-tune it and get it into a place that will be supportive to our work group members. And then we do want to hear from you in terms of corridors. And I think to Jerry's point, there's a lot of strategy that's going to have to go behind identifying and nominating those corridors. So on our next call, and what I'm receiving, 32% of who have voted so far are 100% yes for our next call focused on designation piece. We'll go ahead and make sure that we have a very good structured conversation to really go through that RFI and to think about how we can strengthen and support one another. Any final thoughts from anyone before we adjourn for today? I'm just quickly seeing if any hands are up. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. This has been a great work group session. I hope it was helpful to you. please feel free to reach out to Abby regarding comments, but certainly you can always reach out to me, Susan, and others on our team if you have any questions or if there's anything that we can uniquely do to help you. But we are looking forward to our next work group call, which will be on July 28th, so do look out for an Outlook invitation. And again, thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia, for setting it up.